go. There's this place down by the coast. Oh no. Oh mama, may I...
Howdy there, folks. We're back with another episode of Podward State. Your host, Matthew Paolizzi, joined by my fellow host.
I'm Sam Brungo. Joining us here on this episode, we have associate producer Jordan Mansberger. Jordan, how's it going?
I'm doing great, guys. You know, we had a really cool conversation with candidate for State College Mayor Jim Leous.
Yeah, that was awesome. Continuing our coverage of the mayoral race. If you haven't checked out our previous episode with the other candidate in the mayoral race for State College, Ezra Nanes, we put that episode out the other day. So please check that out if you want. Highly suggest that, especially if you're going to be watching this one, so you can get the full scope and make sure you get to know both of the candidates. But yes, joining us today was Jim Leous. Let's get going, folks. Great conversation. Alrighty, folks. Continuing our coverage of the 2021 mayoral race in State College, we have joining us candidate for mayor, Jim Leous. Jim, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
It's great. Thanks for having me, guys. This is a great format.
Yeah, so I think to get started real quick, do you just want to give us a taste of your past experience in politics, probably more specifically your time on the school board?
Yeah, it can. So I was involved when I was a student here at Penn State. I was a graduate student here at Penn State. I was involved in the Graduate Student Association, and I was vice president of that, and I was part of the University Student Executive Council at the time. So I got a job. I stayed in town, graduated from Penn State, master's degree in astronomy. That's a picture behind me. I stayed in town, and I really got involved when Ed Rendell was running for. So he was the former mayor of Philadelphia. He was then the DNC chair, the Democratic National Committee chair, and he decided to run for Pennsylvania governor. And it was an uphill battle for him because he did not receive the nomination from the state, right? The state party endorsed, who is now Senator Casey. But so he and Senator Casey, it was a pretty tough primary. And at the time, I had two kids. They were infants. They were both in the strollers. And my wife and I went around and we campaigned for Ed Rendell in our neighborhood, dropping off literature, talking to people, telling people why we thought Ed Rendell was a better candidate. And then I stayed involved in the local Democratic Party. And then around, I think it was 2006, I got elected to be a precinct chair. And a further investigation into that proved that it was my wife and a couple of my friends that wrote me in and got me on the ballot for that. So ever since then, from about 2006 on, I've been the precinct person in what we call the Fightin' 31st precinct. So it's mostly around Community Field, Holmes Foster, if you're familiar with the town. Mostly residential area, homeowners. But we do have a lot of student housing interspersed in it, people that live in houses or split houses. So it's a great neighborhood to live in. About 2007, we were having a discussion, sort of a community-wide discussion on what the new high school should look like. And there were different camps. Some people thought there should be two high schools, and some people thought that we should have a high school, but we should move it way to the outskirts where we could buy enough land to have a stadium on campus and everything like that. And then there were the camps that the existing high school was split two campuses across the street from each other, which isn't the best way to go. And so the plan originally was to put all of the stuff on one side of the campus, and that plan really got only partial community support, and it was like a complete failure, and there was a lot of hurt feelings around the district. And so a couple of people said, I was coaching the high school hockey team at the time, so I was pretty well known in the high school, and people would say, you ought to run for school board. All about this stuff. You should run. And you realize once you get on school board, you don't know all about this stuff, right? But so I ran a write-in campaign that time. And one of the most memorable things is I, knocking doors, coming up to people, and I come up to this old guy, and he goes, I'm going to vote for you. You're not going to win. I'll tell you what, my piece of advice to you is get your name on the damn ballot next time. So 2 years later, I got my name on the ballot. And that time, so I prevailed on, you can cross file in school board races. So you run as both a Democrat and a Republican. I prevailed on the Democratic side, and then in the fall, I got elected to the school board. And so at that point, so the community is still pretty divided over what to do, but we know that we have to do something, because some parts of that building are, from around the time of Sputnik, so like 1957 and going forward, so it really needs a lot of work. And, Sam, you were in those old buildings, so I mean, it was a mess and multi-levels, and what we did do is we reached out to the community, and like I say in my platform for mayor, we went to them, right? So I think previous plans, they expected you to show up at school board meetings, and that requires, if you have kids, that requires sometimes getting a babysitter and all that. So we actually went to people. We went to like Cub Scout meetings and Boy Scout meetings, and we went to church meetings, donuts after church at Our Lady of Victory, and the Quaker meeting after worship services. And we went to the synagogue, and we went to, so we went everywhere. We spoke at businesses in the area. We spoke with community groups. We spoke to all of the sort of township groups, township borough council, and we really talked. We talked with about 140, 150 different constituent groups and got their input on the plan. And the plan got greatly modified by people saying what they wanted. So we had community meetings. We had proposed designs. And then one of the best things we did is, so I was in charge of the communications committee at the time, and we surveyed the community, which is always like fraught, right? You can survey with the community, and you say, what do you want to name this new ship from England, right? And they come up with Bodie McBoatface, right? Or you could survey the community and they could take it seriously, and they did. And so they voted among, about 6 different designs, some of which were 2 schools, some of which were, keeping schools on both sides. But the one that won the majority of the opinion was the design that we have in there now, where it's all on one side of the Westerly Parkway, and all the parking's mostly on the other side. And that took a lot of talking to people, and we asked them, how much would you be willing to raise their taxes? And some people was like, it doesn't matter, but those were the real outliers. Some people pay attention to how much they pay in taxes, and the school district tax is a big part of your tax bill if you live in State College. But we eventually put up a bond. You had to vote on a bond, and we did it, and 74% of the community voted in favor of raising their taxes to pay for an $85 million bond. And we got it done, So we over the course of the next 4 years, we completed the high school, and it is, a great building. I don't know if you guys have been past it. I know, Sam, you've been in it. I mean, it's a tremendous building, and it really serves our community, because part of State High is what they call a comprehensive high school, right? Which means it's not just a high school with like mostly college prep courses, but we also have a career technology center attached to it that delivers courses in auto mechanics, but it also does networking and computer programming and architecture and medical arts. So it's designed for students who want to go right into the workforce. Our home building program has a great placement record, as does our auto mechanics. But it's also that students, that are normally college bound can also take electives, because in regular high schools, you usually have to hop on the bus, for half of your day and go to a vocational, VOTEC center somewhere like centrally located in the county. And we do have one of those, and it's fantastic in Center County, called CPI, but we had our own. And because of that, it allows, students like Sam to take courses that interest them, and in fact might set the pace for what they want to do in their college career. We have great culinary arts program. We've got an architecture program, and programming and networking, like I said. So a lot of people that, think they might want to be an engineer sometime, maybe they want to be a network engineer, and that course influences them. So it is really a tremendous building for delivering the kind of curriculum that State High is known for. And that I would say, probably until last year, I would have said that was like my culminating moment on the State College School Board. But in 2011, I wrote a report with Jim Paolizzi, who was on the school board at the time. You probably interviewed Jim. He's Penn State's resident astronaut. He's a kinese professor, and he was actually up on the space shuttle studying like blood flow. So if you haven't interviewed him, you should talk to him. He's a great guy. Write that down. But Jim and I wrote a report called Anytime, Anywhere Learning. And it was about, how can we go remote for, what could we equip our students with so that if we had a snow day, we could go all remote. Well, it turns out we didn't have a snow day. We had a pandemic, right? And we were pretty well poised for that, to go all remote, because the students already had their one-to-one Chromebooks, and we had Zoom and we had Google Meet, and so we could deliver curriculum remotely. And I was rocky at first, but I think when we picked up this last fall, I think they really put a lot of work in over the summer getting our curriculum ready for that. So in retrospect, that might have been the best thing I did on the school board, given the past year. But really, the high school was, a lot of us were just in tears the night the voting results came back. It was just so affirming that our community could say, yes, we support your plan. Yes, we want our taxes raised to provide it. Because if you think about it, only about a third of the taxpayers have kids in the schools, right? So you're asking 2/3 of the community to pay for something which maybe their kids already used, right? Maybe they were in the Sputnik era high school, or maybe they don't have kids yet. Or maybe they're retirees to the area. So you're asking a lot of the community, but they really came through for us. And that was really a great moment on school board. So that's probably a long answer to say, yeah, I've been involved in politics for a long time. So on the local level, I'm a member of the Center County Democratic Committee, the executive committee of the Center County Democratic Committee. And then I'm the faculty staff advisor for the College Democrats. So I'm a Penn State employee, so I can be a advisor to a club. And so that's the club that I advise, is the College Dems, which we have a very active chapter at Penn State.
So after 3 terms of being on the school board, what led you to choose to enter this mayoral race, and what really led you to that decision? Well,
I said back in 2007, people asked me to run, right? They said, you'd be good on school board. And I had pretty much decided that my 3rd term on the school board was going to be my last, because I really was only going to do it twice. And then the high school wasn't finished, and I really wanted to see that through. So I had already informed my colleagues that, you better start recruiting some candidates, because I'm dropping off and a couple of my peers are also dropping off. So there's only one person running for re-election on the school board. So people knew about that, and leading up to the presidential election, they said, you ought to think about running for mayor, because right now we have an interim mayor, and I had applied to be the interim mayor 2 years ago when what had happened is Don Hahn was elected mayor, and then a district justice position came up, which is a full-time position. Don's an attorney, and he was just perfect for the job. So he ran for the job, and he won, but you can't be both. So he had to resign as the mayor. So he resigned, and they opened up this interim mayor position. And I had actually applied for it. And a couple of people said, why? We really didn't know that you were interested in the borough politics. I was like, well, of course, because it affects me, it affects my kids, it affects my neighbors, my friends at work. And so when the presidential campaign was winding down, if it's even truly wound down now, a couple people that had, former borough council members, a couple former mayors said, you ought to consider running for mayor. And because this pandemic has really hit the community hard. So in the school district, we got funds in the first COVID relief package that was passed the end of last summer. We got funds, but what wasn't funded was state and local governments. And in fact, that was quite a sticking point in the original bill. And they basically said, no, we're not going to, you're already going bankrupt. We're not going to rescue you, right? Fortunately, that's changed in the American Rescue Plan. There was about, I think State College just got just under $13 million of funding from the American Rescue Plan. But the school district, I think, will be okay because we've got funding in 3 rounds, plus things like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, provided free school lunches to anybody under 18. So you could be homeschooled, you could be going to, a private school, a charter school, or one of our schools. And if you were under 18, you were eligible for, 2 meals a day, 7 days, right? And it did I have to hand it to our food service people because they did a tremendous job alleviating hunger in the area, right? Because that meant that most parents that were, behind the 8 ball could provide for their children, right? And that's the worst thing you have to do, decide between, like, should I get my diabetes medicine or should I put food on my table? Or should I half my diabetes medicine and, pay for some food on the table? So the school district, working with the, State College Food Bank and the USDA, did a tremendous job alleviating hunger in our community. And I'm very grateful for that. But what didn't happen was that the boroughs and the townships and the cities didn't get rescued, right? So they got no money. And, so a big part of the State College budget is things like parking fees, right? Parking decks, on-street parking. So we didn't have any parking fees for 11 months. Earned income tax was down because we depend very heavily on the hospitality, and tourism industry because of Penn State. And about 20% of the people were out of work in that industry. Most people that were in that industry, like restaurant workers and hotel workers, were very underemployed, 4 or 5 hours a week, instead of like 30. So earned income tax was way down, and there's all kinds of real estate taxes because I can't fill my hotel or I can't fill my apartment complex. So the borough is really behind, and all of the surrounding townships are really behind the 8 ball on that. And so the American Rescue Plan will help, but I think what will help more is if we have, 7 home football games next fall, quite frankly. That will help a lot, getting the dollars back and the tourism dollars back into the community. So what we have to do is we have to sort of judiciously apply that $13 million over the next couple of years to plug the gaps and to get back to that sustainable funding stream to support the borough. So being on the school board, I'm on the school board finance and audit committee. So I'm really familiar with budgeting and particularly municipal budgeting so people said, we really need somebody that's already pretty experienced to run for mayor. So that a few people talked me into it, and then I checked it with the bosses here, my family, and they said, yeah, go ahead and do it. You might get some help from me, so actually my kids have walked, go around, knock doors with me and dropped off literature, everything. That's been great. So, and my wife is always very supportive, even though she doesn't like to get involved in politics at all. So,
awesome. Thanks for giving us a little outline of some of your policies and goals. I think moving now, what I'd like to ask is, I know with politicians, one thing that's always asked of them is, what's your day one plan? Day one in office, what are you doing? What's your plan? Right. I know, the first 100 days is always hyped up for presidents, but for you, for mayor, what are you doing? Day one, say, the people of State College decide to go your way, elect you, and you hop into that office on that first day. What are your goals and what are you planning on doing?
So my prime, obviously the post-COVID recovery, but that's a near-term goal, right? So that can't be handled on day one, despite, but really what my main goal is to make State College a more welcoming community for everyone, right? And so, and we don't think about it, well, maybe you guys think about it, right? So you're here for 4 or 5 years, 4 if you're lucky. And graduate students are here for 5 or 6 years. And we have postdocs that are here for a couple of years and move on. And, faculty members and we have non-traditional students. Because we're Penn State and we have a good relationship with the Department of Defense, we get a lot of people who went into the armed services right out of high school, but now they put in their time, they're coming back and they're on veterans benefits, right? But they're older than the more traditional student. A lot of them have families and they'll only be here for 4 or 5 years, but their needs are totally different, right? And so we have to make it a welcoming community for everyone. We have a lot of international students, we have a lot of international faculty and postdocs. And the interesting thing is, so these people can't vote for me, right? They can't vote for the mayor, or else I guess they get charged with a crime, but they can't vote for me. But a lot of what borough council does, a lot of what the mayor does or the administration of the borough greatly affects them. Things like zoning changes, things about ordinances, parking ordinances, housing ordinances, rental rules, rental inspections. A lot of that affects them because they're not the more traditional homeowners. The people that largely vote for the mayor and borough council are homeowners, right? And they're not renters, and they're not, for the most part, they're not students either. And we can talk about that. I think we should talk about that a little bit later. But I want to make it clear that anybody can talk to me. And what I also want to do, so when I was on the Grad Student Association, I was on Mayor Addison's committee, Student Advisory Committee. But it always struck me as that Student Advisory Committee was mostly made up of like student government leaders, right? So you've interviewed a lot of student government leaders. So they have one take on what the university should be doing, what the town should be doing. But somebody that lives off campus and, in a terrible rental has a quite different idea of what the borough should be doing from them. So I want to hear from those type of students here. So one of the things that I've said is that, so my office is right on campus, and I'm just going to go over to the hub probably for lunch one day a week and just put up a little placard, the mayor's in, and the first, 10 or 12 people that sit down with me will just like this, right? We'll talk about anything they want to talk about. We talk about what's bugging them, what they like about living in the borough, what they like about living, on campus, but near the borough. what makes them happy, what bothers them, all sorts of things. Because one thing that I've learned, I would say one difference that between Jim that was first elected to school board and Jim now is I think I'm a lot better listener. I think I learned patience, and I learned to listen a lot better. And so I'll be listening to those people. So in the first 100 days, I've told people in my CNET interview and on some of these forums that I'm going to do a listening tour, and I'm going to talk to these various constituent groups. I will probably have an international council. I will probably have a people of color, indigenous, BIPOC committee to advise me, so I can hear what people of color are experiencing, which is very different from my experience or my kids' experience in State College. And then I will have a course continue the student advisory committee that Mayor Filippelli has. So because that's always important. But again, you get one sort of view. So I think going to people, the other thing I learned on my tenure on school board was you really got to go to people. You got to go where they are, where they feel comfortable, where they feel, some people, I don't think you'd go up to Joe Biden and say, "Hi, Mr. President, I was wondering about this." But certainly in downtown State College, there's that opportunity to say, hi to a borough council member or school board member or the mayor, right? And say, I'm wondering about this. Or the former mayor of State College, Elizabeth Gorham, called one of the jobs of the mayor is to be the complaints department. So she went out and got complaints at State College, pa.com or whatever. So that's a lot, but I'll hear them and I'll write them down and I'll take them. It's like my job at Penn State. I listen to people's concerns and I try to take them to the right person that can get their problem solved. And that's what I will do as mayor. And certainly I will start that listening tour day one, and 100 days later, I will report out to the borough council and borough management and say, this is what I found. This is what people are telling me.
Kind of going off that a little bit, the town and gown relationship is really important in State College, obviously, because Penn State might not be the same without State College, and State College certainly would not be the same without Penn State. So what do you think is one way that you would like to tap into the resources of the student body and to, have the town and university work together and better understand each other? Because sometimes that comes with a little bit of conflict.
Well, there's a couple things there that, that's a great question. And I think, when you say town and gown, I think people hear town versus gown a lot of times. And I don't think that that's all that true. I know, Mayor Filippelli and Jesse Barlow, the council president, regularly meet with Penn State administrators. But, one of the things that has to get better is regional planning, right? So we have something called the Center Organization of Governments, the COG in the Center region, and that's the State College Borough, and that's the townships that surround it. But if we leave Penn State out of that, then we're leaving out a huge part of the region. So in terms of recreation, sustainability, in terms of, bike paths, walking paths, a lot of those go through, the campus proper, right? So connect from an outlying town to downtown State College. You got to go across the golf course, or you got to go, through campus and the routes on campus. So we have to get better at planning regionally, and that's the only way that we're going to reach our sustainability goals, and that Penn State is going to reach their sustainability goals and the regional sustainability goals, is to plan regionally. We're too small. Any of us is too small to do it on our own, but together we can do it. So that's sort of addresses the town gown. I mean, I think when I take a look at the student body and particularly how the student body's changed over the last 10 years, there's a lot of emphasis in the curriculum and extracurriculars on entrepreneurship, right? So almost every college has an entrepreneurship major. When I was the head of the emerging technologies group, and so we would say what technologies are out there 3 to 5 years that we think Penn State can take advantage in research and teaching in the service mission to the university, right? But what we found is that a lot of students have good ideas. And before Lion Path came on board, and that was kind of a painful experience, I know. But there were all kinds of students that came up with ways to game the system, to register for classes, to get on the wait list. And they'd be like, we've got to stop them. We've got to stop them. And I said, no, we've got to hire them, right? Because they clearly understand the problem better than you do, right? They understand what it's like to be on a wait list and have to keep, checking in or whatever. So they automate it, right? So nobody has to do that anymore. So we have all kinds of creative students, and we have all kinds of, entrepreneurial options. We have contests like the Nittany AI Challenge, which I was involved in, the Hacker Challenge, the Business Pitch Case Challenge, the Law School Challenge. We have lots of bright students that we can take advantage of. And there's a program called Code for America, which I'm a sponsor of. And they were actually the people that plugged in when healthcare.gov was failing miserably, when the Obamacare came online, and the sign up thing was failing miserably. They got a bunch of people from Code for America, and they say, you have 60 days to do this. And they did it. They improved it because they're used to working with customers, as most governmental agencies are not, right? But so I want to have interns. I want to apply to Code for America to get us thing. There's all kinds of things that you can think of. For instance, if you're walking along Beaver Avenue, they have those drains that come out and they're covered by metal, right? And they always get out of whack and people are tripping over them or whatever. So in some towns, they have an app called like Open 611, right? And you take a picture of the problem, right? It geolocates you. It puts an order in the work orders for the maintenance crew for the borough of State College, and then it gets fixed, right? So you don't have to call it in. You don't have to say, well, damn it, I fell over that again, or whatever. You can deal with it immediately, simple as taking a picture, pushing a button, it goes into the work orders. You're already geolocated, so they know exactly where it is. It's those kind of things that if you appify a lot of the problems that a small municipality like ours has, you can lower the workload on people that are the maintenance people, are the public works people. At the same time, you can be more responsive to customer. So that's one of the things that I want to put in place, and I want to get student interns to do that, because I know, I've been saying for years, we should hire these guys, right? The borough should hire these guys, right? Whoever they are, if they come up with a great idea for improvement, let's give them a paid internship. Let's give them the summer to get it done, and let's see how far they get. So I am a big proponent of using students to on specialized projects that can be done over a semester or a summer, and can really make an improvement in people's lives. And that's probably the biggest thing, that I would take advantage of the entrepreneurial nature of today's Penn State student, which, like I said, it wasn't that way 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but it is that way now. We're teaching that in our engineering classes and our business classes, and we just got to embrace that spirit. The other thing that would do is, when I was first, out of grad school, so I'm, late 20s, and there's not a lot of late 20s people that are sticking around here, right? There's not a lot of people that graduate from Penn State and stick around. And that's because they're lured by jobs in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., you know, out in Silicon Valley. But what if we made State College a more attractive community to our Penn State graduates, particularly our young undergraduates or our young graduates, that made them want to stick around? Well, to do that, we've got to attract some high-tech companies. We've got to attract some good-paying jobs. But I think that this pandemic has shown that you can live anywhere and still work at Penn State. What I want you to do is I want you to work anywhere and live here in State College, right? So I want you to be part of our community, and we've shown that can work. So I want to encourage people to stick around, but the way we encourage people to stick around is affordable housing, is gathering places downtown, that appeal. I know you guys are college students right now, but there's a different demographic that, than a college student that some of these gathering places appeals to. More places like Three Dots downtown that are good for our arts community, more places like Webster's that people can gather with that, aren't the traditional, we got bars aplenty, right? Bars and restaurants aplenty, but places that people can gather outside. I am a big fan of Summers on Allen. And I know that some of my colleagues who are running for borough council don't believe that, but I've often thought, we have, 2 or 3 weeks a year where we close down Allen Street, between Beaver and College Avenue for Arts Fest, for instance. And those are some of the best moments of the summer, and gets people out, gets people circulating, the entertainment. If we can make that go all summer long, that would be terrific. And so I'm a huge fan of that. And that's what I'm talking about. It'd be more appealing to families with young kids. It would be more appealing to 20-somethings and 30-somethings. So I'm probably pretty representative of the demographic of people that are going to vote for me, right? But we need all kinds of people in this community. I'm reading Heather McGee's book now called The Sum of Us, right? And it's mostly about the history of racial discrimination in this country, and how some people have, it's things like, well, the public pools are now accessible to African Americans. Okay, what we'll do is we'll fill them up, right? We'll pour concrete in them so nobody can use them, right? Oh, that's a great idea. But that's what actually happened places down south. When they went to integrate some of these recreational facilities, they closed them. Rather than being integrated, they said, well, if we can't just have them for whites only, we'll close them. And her premise is that we're only going to, economic success for this country depends on all people participating in the economy, all people participating in community, not just traditional white middle class people, right? So that's my theme. My theme is inclusiveness and a welcoming community. I don't care if you're here for only 4 years. I want this to be the best 4 years of your life. I want you to think, how can I get back to State College? I want to get a job so I can live in State College. And again, the pandemic has shown that you can do that, right? So you can get a job and work remotely. I call the CIO for my campaign. He's a recent Penn State IST graduate, and he's working for what they call a Beltway bandit. So they do work for the defense industry in the DC area, but he's working from his bedroom at home, right? So he's a local State College kid, and he's working from home. So I want to encourage that, and because it is the sum of us that is going to make this a better place to live.
So I think moving into, I think more of a specific policy sticking point, but definitely one that I've kind of been thinking about a lot, is sort of the boom in residential development in downtown State College. I think everybody's noticed it by now. These huge residential buildings that are going up. whether it's the here or any of these other big ones that are being up. And it seems like every year, it's just more and more development, more and more construction going on in downtown State College. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know sometimes, students or local people can, maybe get a little, they're not really super in favor of it sometimes, because they see it as sort of crowding or drowning out the town, right? It looks more like just, soulless big buildings to stuff students in rather than, a living, breathing community. So what are your thoughts on sort of those recent developments in downtown State College and how they relate to your sustainability policies, especially when it comes to zoning in general?
Yeah. So, I think people expect, somebody who's living in town as long as I have say, oh, it's terrible. It's not my state college anymore. But I'm of two minds for this, right? I guess that's a typical politician answer, right? But I like the fact that they're denser, okay? I like the fact that they're close to campus and close to downtown, right? Because that's part of sustainability, right? If you can stack, basically heating and cooling on top of each other, right? You're going to make a much more energy efficient building. If I don't have to, live out in Patton Township and drive, 5 miles into town and park and then walk or take public, transportation to where I am on campus, that's more sustainable, right? So that people don't need, they can get by with a walking or a bike to get to most places around town. So rather than being against them, I mean, some people say, well, it's blocking my view of downtown. I think it's part of a sustainability policy, right? What bothers me a little bit, okay, is that, so these are luxury student apartments, right? That's how they're sold. And the per pillow price is quite expensive, so even if Penn State, keeps their tuition down, right, which they've been in an effort to do for a couple of years now, you're seeing increases of 10% a year on already exorbitant rents. Now, what I would have thought, and I still think this is probably true. So the Penn State student population, the undergraduate student population at University Park is not increasing, right? There's no plans to increase it. So I don't know where they're getting all these pillows to put people in, right? Because we have a lot of stock in sort of what I call older apartment complexes like Beaver Canyon. Think about Beaver Canyon and some of the, 6, 7 story. What's going to happen with those? And so my proposal would be that those would become workforce housing, so we use that term, but basically it's affordable housing, excuse me, affordable housing that's close to campus, right? So I work with people that drive in from Altoona, that drive in from Tyrone, that drive in from Phillipsburg, that, that drive in from Huntington County to get to work at Penn State, right? Because they can't afford to live in town. And that's completely unsustainable. If you're driving 30 miles to here and 30 miles back every single day, how unsustainable is that? How much carbon footprint do you have? As opposed to if these luxury student apartments fill up with the students that can afford them, I would hope that the ones on Beaver Canyon and some of those ones would become more affordable housing for the community. And that's part of a sustainability plan too. If I'm not driving 30 miles to work at Penn State and then driving 30 miles to be home, my life is better and also the environment's better for it. So my hope is that this explosion in these 14-story buildings will ultimately be a good thing for the affordable housing market in State College. Does that answer? I also think that we should build these with less space for cars, right? And so we should encourage people to have to pay a premium to park near there, and rely on, CATA, Central Area Transportation Authority, rely on bikes and rely on walking, to work. And the loops are tremendous, for students. I even ride them myself sometimes. So it's really, we obviously could get better at some of the transportation, some of the public transportation here, but it's not bad. It's not bad, and it makes for a more sustainable community.
Yeah, that was great. So then sort of moving back towards your campaign, we had Ezra Nanes on the show this week. He had some kind words to say about you and your qualifications. So we're wondering, what do you feel sort of sets you apart from your competition in this election?
Well, let me just say that I have kind words to say about Ezra too. We've been together on a couple things lately. We were at the Black Caucus March last week that commemorated the village at the hub, which I was here for. It was just absolutely crazy, but it sent a message, and it sent a message that racism wasn't going to be tolerated at Penn State. And if the people were not listening to these students, they occupied the hub, and they occupied the hub for a couple weeks, and it was just a 24-hour party in there. It was great, but it drove the message home that if you won't listen to us, we'll make you listen to us. And so they had a lot of support. The Black Caucus that did that, they had a lot of support for, faculty and staff and their fellow students. But so we've seen each other. In fact, I saw him at the Martin Luther King Plaza vigil. The Martin Luther King Plaza was vandalized, and so they had a vigil down there. And the day before, I'd been walking around knocking doors, and I went to a guy's house that I work with, and he was obviously busy. And like one kid after another came up to the, and I think the guy was looking around for a mask, which seems to be a common thing. And finally, I heard it was about an 11-year-old girl, and she said, "Hey, Dad, that guy that's running against Ezra Nanes is here." So I told Ezra that, and we both had a pretty good chuckle out of that. But yeah, we've known each other for years. We've been involved in the Center County Democratic Committee, and he is a tremendous campaigner. He's a tremendous organizer. I would say that what I've talked about some has set me apart is that I've been, involved in elected a position for 11 plus years, and I've seen budgeting, sustainable building. We almost all of our new school district buildings are LEED Gold, which is the green energy, the green building consortium, and 3 of them achieved LEED Platinum last year, which is the highest level of sustainable building that you can do. So I've had some experience in sustainable building, making more sustainable campus, and budgeting, and sort of dealing with people that like I said, when I first came on the board, there was a lot of healing that had happened in this community. And I think when we talk about the Borough of State College right now, I think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in State College. And so I would say that I'm the guy to do that. And so that I would, because I'm a good listener, empathetic. You can ask, I have a lot of friends, a lot of the guys I play hockey with are not Democrats. Let's just say that, but we get along, we exchange ideas, and I listen to them, and some of the best ideas for some of the things that we did with the high school came from, people that were not Democrats. So I think I'm a good listener. I also, people say, well, what does it take to be a good school board member? That's always one of the first questions that comes up in those forums. And so my pat answer to that is an open mind and a thick skin, right? Because somebody's always going to disagree with you, and you just gotta talk to them and listen to them, because they're not disagreeing for the most part because for the sake of disagreeing, right? They have legitimate views that are different from yours, right? And if I see this all the time at the national level, right? The two parties don't listen to each other anymore. They talk past each other, and they all have their talking points, and they don't deviate from those talking points. Well, unless you deviate from your talking points, nothing's going to get accomplished, or nothing meaningful is going to get accomplished, or some of the best ideas aren't going to come out. The best ideas come out when somebody has half an idea and somebody else has another half an idea, and you can figure a creative way to put those two ideas together, or those two halves of an idea, and come up with an even better idea. So that's what I would say. I'm sort of a mediator. I listen, I'm empathetic, and I have a good deal of experience in elected office.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jim. So I think now, kind of getting more, I guess, meta, how important do you think it is for people to get involved in local elections, right? Because I feel like, turnout rates are often very low. I mean, I think turnout rates in general, nationally, are normally pretty low. I think, the last, presidential election we had was definitely an outlier when it comes to previous years. An outlier in a good way, of course.
Yes.
People coming out. But if you had to make like a pitch, to get people out to come and get involved and vote in their local elections, how important it is to vote for mayor, what would you tell them?
Okay, so let me give you a couple anecdotes. So the second time when I ran for re-election to school board, at the time, I think there were 5 precincts in the hub. Now the hub is all one precinct now. So there were 5 precincts in the hub, and they were all about 1,000 students, or 1,300 students each. So I won the one precinct. I won on the Democratic side 13 votes, and the next nearest competitor got 11. On the Republican side, I lost by 1 vote, 3-2 to my colleague David Hutchinson, right? So that's in a whole precinct, fewer than 20 people voted for school board, right? But the school board is the biggest part of the tax bill, right? So if you're paying rent to a landlord, part of your rent is going toward that tax bill. So if that tax bill gets increased, it's the fact that you didn't vote for the candidate that said they would hold the line on taxation, that's on you. So I'm the advisor of the college Democrats. And one of the roles of the advisor is to help out during the elections of the officers. And quite often, it goes like this. So I'm running for treasurer this year, and I know this year is an election year, but I think we can still do a lot of good stuff, and it goes on. And so we get through about 6 of those. And at the end, I always give the same sort of speech. So I say, I heard, about 5 of you said this wasn't an election year. And I said, as leaders among the Democrats on this college campus, you should know that every year is an election year. In fact, we have 2 elections most years, right? A primary and a general election that you can participate in. And you think that the president is the most important person in your life? It might be the district attorney who decides not to charge your fraternity, or decides not to, or decides to reduce the charges on you for a drinking offense or an alcohol, or sends you to, or recommends ARD, or a local district judge recommends ARD instead of, serving probation, or going on, a underage drinking offense going on your record, or a pot offense going on your record. So, that thing. So who's on borough council, right? Who decides on zoning? Who decides on zoning can be amended? That has more of an effect in your neighborhood than who the president of the United States is, or who the secretary of state is, right? Or even who the governor is. That has more importance in your life. So I encourage students to vote in their local elections, make themselves aware of issues. Right now we have, I think, 5 statewide judge vacancies, right? So there's 1 in the Supreme Court, 2 in Commonwealth, and 2 in Superior Court. And You might not think those are important, but guess who decided on the, GOP Donald Trump versus the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania? Guess who decided on those rulings? Guess who decided on when the legislature put an onerous voter ID requirement on voters and the Penn State ID did not satisfy it for students? Guess who intervened? The state Supreme Court ultimately decided that that was an unconstitutional law under the Pennsylvania state constitution. Who your judges are make a difference. Who your DA makes a difference. And I would posit that who's on borough council and who your mayor is makes a difference too. So that's what I would tell people that think their vote doesn't count. John Fetterman, our lieutenant governor, the first time he was elected mayor of Braddock, he won by 1 vote. Well, obviously that guy that decided to vote that day and decided not, and then somebody who decided not to vote that day made a big difference for John Fetterman and ultimately made a big difference for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania because he's our lieutenant governor now. So it's important. If you don't think that your vote counts, send me email and I'll talk to you, because it does. And it can make a big difference who your mayor is and who your borough council is to your lives as students here.
Awesome. Jim, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. Before we let you go, we really appreciate your time, but we were just wondering how folks that are listening here can learn more about you, keep in touch, and any general election information you have for our listeners.
Sure. So about the election, so the deadline to register or change your registration pass, that was May 3rd. May 11th is the last day to apply for a mail-in ballot, right? So that's coming up. But don't wait till May 11th, right? Because although we do have, drop-off ballot boxes at the hub in the borough building, the municipal building on Allen Street. So you can fill them out and drop them off there. The other thing you can do is you can actually go to Bellefonte. It's the Willowbank building in Bellefonte. You can look it up on centercountyvotes.com, which is the election site. You can go there. You can apply for a no excuses absentee ballot. You can get it. You can vote it and hand it right back there. And it takes about my son did that at the last election because he was working one of the precinct places. He was a greeter at one of the precinct places for the presidential election. So I drove him to the Willowbank building, and 30 minutes later, we were back to State College. The buses go out there, and you might want to contact the local Center County Democratic office if you need a ride. We do have a ride board. People can drive you there. If you don't do that, you can vote in person. The election's on May 18th. Okay. And you can go on pavotes.com and find out where you're registered to vote and where your precinct's located. Because of COVID, some of the ones that were in retirement communities have moved. So you might, if you had voted previously at a retirement community, you probably want to go to, either centercountyvotes.com and look up your place. So was about the election stuff. So how do you get in touch with me? Well, it's a pretty simple theme. You guys seem to have no problem getting in touch with me on my Twitter handle at JLEOUS. Okay, JLeous. I also have my website is jleo.us. Okay, and I blog on medium.com, and that's jleous.medium.com. So we're detecting a pattern here. And then my email for this campaign is Jim4Mayor with FOR, not the number 4, Jim4Mayor@leous.org. So that's how you can get a hold if you need to reach out to me, get a hold. I think that's how Sam and I got in touch. So pretty simple. And I'm also on LinkedIn, and but I mainly, my main social media is Twitter. Okay, so yeah, and then so I'm fully vaccinated. So in a week or two, you can get a hold of me at the ice rink because I will be resuming playing geriatric hockey.
Awesome. Once again, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well,
When we talked to Ezra Nanes earlier in the week, we introduced him as a friend of the show, since that was actually his second time appearing on our podcast. He was on back in November or October, I think. And we talked about generally getting out the vote and getting people registered and the importance of doing that, which was a great show. But we would like to extend that courtesy and that title to you as well. So, friend of the show, Jim.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you know, when I was running the emerging technologies group, so we brought blogging online at Penn State, and a couple guys, Eli Glazer, you might know him, Davis Schaefer, you might know him, said, what if we had a blog for Penn State? Okay, and I think you guys know the rest of the story. So that's so I know there was a third fellow. I'm not sure I remember who that was anymore, but I knew those guys when they started Onward State, and this is a tremendous legacy from the blogging service at Penn State to this. I mean, you guys are a wonderful form of journalism, a wonderful new media. You know, more publications like our Center Daily Times should look at what you guys are doing and should try to emulate you guys. So thank you, and thank you for making me a friend of the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jim.
All right.
Alrighty, folks, and that was our awesome conversation with Jim Leous. Great guy, awesome. Great chatting with him, getting his view on things, especially after we talked to, again, Ezra Nanes earlier in the week, the other candidate for mayor. Once again, a pitch. May 18th is the election itself. May 11th is sort of the deadline to put in your mail-in ballots. So make sure you get those in, folks. Make sure that you're staying a part of your local democracy. But again, please check out the other episode with Ezra Nanes if you haven't already, so that you get the full scope of the mayoral race and you know exactly who the two candidates are and who would win.
Thanks again to Jordan for joining us, our awesome associate producer. And from Matt Paolizzi, my name is Sam Brungo, signing off. Be safe, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Podward State is an Onward State produced podcast. Onward State is an independent, student-run Penn State news site that works to generate honest conversation in the hopes of enriching the Penn State community. The show was founded by Matthew Ogden, Matthew Paolizzi, and Mitchell Stewart in 2019. The show is hosted by Samuel Brungo, Matthew Paolizzi, and Grace Cunningham. Executive producer, Samuel Brungo. Associate producers, Jordan Mansberger and Will Pegler. Editor, Samuel Brungo. Podward State releases episodes weekly and features discussions about all things Penn State, including sports, news, student life, and entertainment, which will be available on Spotify and YouTube.
Got to let it roll on by. I'm up so high. It's these clouds that come and go.